What is going on, y'all? This is the Daily Destroyer, Week 4 DFS, Dynasty Warzone Network. As always, I am Tyler. This is Lou. DraftKings main slate. Really talking cash, but we just really can't help ourselves. We'll talk some tournament plays here and there, but we're really talking cash games. Let's start it off, like we always do, at the quarterback position. Lou, I'll let you start us off here. Cash plays, quarterback. Give me the guy you're buying, or maybe a fade, but give me something hot.
Yeah, I think this week a lot of people are going to be looking to pay up at quarterback. There's a big gap between quarterbacks this week. There's a lot above 8K that I think were reasonable to play. You have Hurts, Allen, and Lamar. And then the only other ones I want to play are under 6K. So it's just a big gap there. So it's either like you pay up or pay down. I don't think lineup construction wise, to me, when I've been trying to test out lineups, paying down to someone like Mariota hasn't gotten me enough, really, for me to necessarily want to do that over paying up for Allen or Lamar or Hurts. I think I'll probably do Allen. He just seems he's so consistent. His team is it's one of the better teams we've seen in the past few years. And this game environment, highest scoring total expected this week. Both sides of the game, both QBs are crushing. Lamar is having another one of those MVP starts to a season. I wouldn't really fault you for picking Lamar over Allen. I think either one probably works well this week. People are going to want to be targeting this game. I want parts of this game, and we're going to come to it later down, but I think it's easier for me to just take Allen. You get all that Bills opportunity right there. For me, I'm probably signing with Allen this week.
Yeah, I was joking because this game obviously is going to be the highest owned. It's the game of the week. The Buffalo versus the Ravens here. But the real reason is because the Ravens secondary is like in 3 weeks. It's only 3 weeks. They're like the stone worst secondary in the entire NFL. It's like literally free points through the air. So like my contrarian in me is that we're gonna see like Josh Allen rushing 2 touchdowns or like Singletary get like a rushing touchdown. There's gonna be like 3 rushing touchdowns from the Bills side.
Singletary went off last week.
Yeah,
too.
just to get people who are absolutely on this chalk passing matchup. But that does lead me to Josh Allen because I wouldn't be surprised if he rushed a couple in here. But still, you're capturing pretty much everything with Josh Allen. All these points that are expected at this point in time, at least 4 touchdowns. So I'm with you on the Josh Allen thing. I'm probably playing over Lamar. Hurts is a good play. Let's go to sub 6 here. I'll kick things off. We talked about Marcus Mariota last week. I expect him to be pretty highly owned. He's really popping in terms of the projections this week against the Cleveland Browns, who, I think have a better defense than they're given credit for, but at the same time, it's not enough to scare me off at 5,600. The game that I do find interesting, though, is obviously going to be that Seattle-Detroit game. We're going to be talking about Detroit, I think, almost every week, just considering how good their offense has been and how bad their defense is. And that squarely puts, Geno Smith and Jared Goff. I know, it's kind of gross to say out loud here, on the air, that I've interest in Jared Goff and Geno Smith in cash, but you look at the game total, you look at, how they've both been playing better than we thought they would play, but before the season started. I mean, Geno and Jared Goff both finishing in the top 18 quarterbacks this year, the way things have looked isn't the most absurd statement. It just, to me, it's like you look at the implied total, you look at how these offenses have been operating, you look at some of their pieces. There's just some interest if you do need to pay down. While I would agree with you that, I think there's other ways to go about your lineup to save some money where you can go Josh Allen. If you're looking to save Geno Smith and Jared Goff and maybe Mariota in there as well. Your thoughts on these sub 6K quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, this is where I'm looking in tournaments more likely. I don't think I'll end up doing it in cash, but I think probably my favorite. It's tough to say. I just think Goff is in such a good spot the line has moved in this game, but there was a point in time this week where the Lions were implied the most points on the entire slate. Most raw points for a team were the Lions. And how often have we ever been able to say that? So I think I'm just abnormally high on the lines this week. My issue with Goff, however, is there are a lot of injuries for his wideouts. So that, to me, I think for like a cash standpoint, safety standpoint, I would end up leaning Mariota. Not even that much with it being $300 cheaper, but Mariota has shown that he has a pretty solid floor. He's willing to run. They do some designed runs. That game also has a pretty high implied total, which I was sort of surprised. But the Falcons, I believe that was all 3 games they have over 25 points.
Been played well.
So a lot of their games have been sneakily shootouts. And to me, like, Mariota's having a pretty solid season. The Falcons are looking a lot better than I think people expected them to be this year. So I think I'd lead Mariota there in this range.
And another, I don't know if it's off the wall, honestly, but another pick that I do have interest in is going to be Trevor Lawrence. I know you and I have been playing a bit of Trevor Lawrence lately. I mean, the Jags are for real, man. Like, I think the Jags are good. I think the Jags are for real. I think this offense is legit. It's really damning for Urban Meyer at this point in time, but it really doesn't matter. But they're playing Philadelphia, and I think at this point in time, after 3 weeks again, the Eagles are looking like one of the best teams in the NFL, no doubt. But I think, there's some, recency bias here where we're like, wow, the Eagles really, they shut down the Vikings, they shut down the Commanders, but like they're forgetting that the Lions put up 35 points on the Eagles. And I believe that the Jags offense is every bit as good as the Lions offense. So it's like, yeah, the Eagles are good, and I probably would bet the Eagles to win this game, even though it's, a bit of a revenge game here for our head coach over here in Jacksonville. But, the Lions, at least in week 1, proved that you can move the ball on the Eagles, and I don't think they're necessarily this invincible defense that just happened to really lock up the Vikings and the Commanders. So at 5,700, Trevor Lawrence is a guy. He hasn't really done me wrong, and in cash, he just seems to have that kind of floor this year where he's just going to get it done. He's like, I think like Trevor Lawrence this year is going to be what people hoped Derek Carr would be in terms of just like an above average quarterback that's consistent. But your thoughts on T. Law, even though I think I know them.
I wish he ran more because we do know he has that ability, and that would obviously help the floor. But I mean, his price is pretty low. He seems like one of those guys that's going to get 15 to 25 points pretty much each week. He hasn't hit that 300-yard bonus yet, but he's gotten close a few times. He has Chris Kirk, who's pretty solid wide receiver to throw to. He's got good options. The team has been playing well. I think one of my favorite bets this week would be something like you could parlay. I think it's 6.5 points in that game at this point. But you parlay like Jags, the over with Jags getting points, because I think it could end up being a shootout where they're going back and forth for a while. For sure. Or Eagles blow them out, So to me, I kind of like pairing those two together. But yeah, I've played a Lawrence stack each week this year. Been pretty high on the Jags each game. And I thought after winning last week, they weren't going to be sneaky anymore. And it seems like they still might be.
Quarterback pool. Give me your pool of 3 quarterbacks here. And if there's one we haven't talked about, obviously, let's touch on it.
Yeah, I'm going to do Allen, Mariota, and Lamar as my third.
Hitting those quarterbacks in that game. It's going to be popular.
Yeah, I feel like Lamar, even though he's been getting like 40 points the last few weeks, might not get played that much because people are just going to click on Allen at the same price, So I think Lamar could honestly end up being sneaky.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. People are going to be really hammering that. Running backs. I think there's a lot of injuries happening that opens up, some money here at the running back position. But either way, there's not anyone that's necessarily super expensive that, is too much of a concern here. I mean, I'll start things off here. I mean, Barkley again, 8K. Like, obviously he's in playing cash. I expect him to probably be like 20, 25% owned. He's just been doing it this year. He gets the volume. He's their main playmaker. He gets everything. So for 8K with the volume that Saquon gets, I mean, it's pretty easy to find Saquon Barkley in your cash lineup. It's pretty easy to fit him in there as well with the savings elsewhere. Are you with me on Saquon?
Yeah, he just seems like one of the locks of the week. There's not a ton to pay up for. And, like, as far as like cash goes. They made pricing a little softer this week on the high end, as in Jonathan Taylor is now under 9K. There's not these high end
Eckler's
wide
under 8K.
receivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the high end guys are playing in island games this week. We have all of the Bengals and Dolphin guys are off the slate. The Jefferson Cup, a lot of these guys are just off the slate, so that helps with it. All the Chiefs are off the slate, and to me, that just makes Barkley that much more of a standout for 8K. What his usage has been, and a lot of these higher end running backs, we saw it last week, just underperformed and have been underperforming. So it's a little tougher to go to some of those high end guys, but yeah, I think Saquon's one of them that I'll definitely be putting into lineups. You're mute.
Thank you. Swift is the injury that we need to talk about here because that opens up Jamal Williams 6,100. I mean, it's just a good play. And then also Herbert. It looks like Montgomery's going to miss. He's 5,700. These are two guys I have a lot of interest in. I mean, I wish Jamal Williams was a little cheaper at 6,100. He's appropriately priced, but from what we've seen this year, even when Swift is healthy, the 6,100 is warranted. He'll likely find his way into my lineups, but he's also the chalk of the week. And then Herbert. I don't think he's necessarily going to be as chalky, but still, when Montgomery gets ruled out, he's going to be highly owned. I mean, we saw over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns last week, and they're playing the Giants, who are solid in their own right, but still, Herbert's looking good. So, Jamal Williams, Herbert, 2 running backs that are now on our radar that we'd like to play due to injury. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're somewhat must plays. Part of that is the standpoint that a lot of people are going to play them, and for like cash build, Jamel Williams is probably my favorite guy to fade in tournaments this week. Partly because that price tag it's not that cheap. There are other guys in that range who have just way more. I don't want to say experience, but being the lead back, James Conner. He's the same price as Ezekiel Elliott, who people have their thoughts on him, but you have Miles Sanders, like Antonio Gibson, James Conner, and James Robinson that are like right there.
Yep.
So it's very easy to come off of him in tournaments, but in cash, it's one of those, like, if he does get 100 yards and a touchdown and you don't have him in cash, then you're already trailing everyone. So I think he's someone I would play in cash and fade in tournaments. And then Herbert, another guy who he was one of my top owned running backs in best ball this year. I'm pretty high on Herbert in general. Been sort of waiting to see what he can do with opportunity. So I'll be playing him this week.
It's been good.
Yeah, I'd like to see another good game out of him. He'll be also pretty chalky, a little cheaper than Jamal. So I think for me, I'd rank them Barkley, Herbert, and Jamal, but those 3 are probably all going to be in my cash lineup.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward for me. If for some reason you didn't play those 3, Lou, who do you think would be in contention for one of those spots?
I think I really like Nick Chubb this week. He's another guy who, even though he just keeps getting. You want to hear some Nick Chubb stats for this year? So he's running a lot. Kareem Hunt is also just like not as deep involved as he was in the past few years, but Chubb in each of the 3 games this year, he either has 100 yards or 3 touchdowns. So I like those odds.
Those are good.
He's pretty good.
He's pacing well.
In injury, I'm watching, which I'm not really sure if it's one that is going to end up being anything, but is AJ Dillon. If he were to miss, I'd have a lot of interest in Aaron Jones. 500 less than Saquon, but 10-point favorites against New England, who just lost Mac Jones. I think you could see an uptick in touches for Jones if Dillon was out. Dillon has been taking a lot of the work. So 7,500 for Jones with Dillon in isn't all that exciting, but with Dillon out would you have any interest in Dillon if he were in? 6K, he's getting a lot of work, but still in a timeshare?
Probably not. Not at 6K, man. It's just the
Yeah.
timeshare, and I've not really loved how Green Bay has been looking this year. So it's like the price just isn't right for me, and there's other guys around him, so I'd be fading. But another guy that I like here that I think is a little bit sneaky is Ramandre Stevenson on the other side there. 5,200, good price. He's just trending towards taking the lead role away from Damian Harris. He's priced $100 underneath him, this week, so they're pretty much the same. But you look at the way things are trending right now, and Ramondre Stevenson, he's leading in touches, not a complete surprise. Leading in targets and catches. That's not a surprise either. But what is surprising about Ramondre Stevenson is he has been getting, I'd say it's close to a 50-50 split, but it is still leaning Ramondre's way in terms of work inside the 10. So like he's getting the pass work, he's getting the work inside the 10, he's getting more touches, and he's kind of working himself into like a more of a lead back role. Like it's still committee, but the lead in the committee. And I think it's just a matter of time before like things like kind of flip. And I'm not saying this is the last time we'll see Stevenson this cheap at 5,200, but I think there's a chance that he almost runs away with this, where he's like the clear head of a committee over Damian. So he's a guy. If I need to get down a bit from the Herberts and the Jamal Williams, and I want to get a little different, I'm looking at Ramondre. I haven't needed to do it yet, but at the same time, he's in the pool for me.
In like that game environment, if the 10-point difference is true, like Ramondre could end up getting peppered with a few extra targets this week. We saw you could argue he was the best running back last week. In DK, a lot of the top end guys failed. He had 20 points. I think he was in the Millie winner. He was in a lot of high up there lineups that I remembered seeing. So, I mean, he was one of the best plays last week. Seems like people not really forgotten about him, but not sure how popular he'll be in DFS, but I do like that call. The other guy that's cheap, that it's kind of gross, but Rashad Penny.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah,
he's under 5K, but
you take away his name,
But yeah,
you take away his name, you look at the
people
usage.
Aren't going to play, but like one of these weeks, he's probably just bound to go off. But with his price, he might get ownership. Is Najee Harris?
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to say that.
The Jets. Just like price wise, ceiling wise, like he can get there, but just a Mitch Trubisky run offense.
It's not sexy.
Looks so bad right now.
Yeah, the offensive line's pretty shitty too. So there's that. Let's go to the pool here, Lou. And if obviously there's one missing, let's talk about it. But go pool. I'm going to challenge you because I feel like there's 3 pretty easy ones. Let's go pool of 5 running backs.
Yeah, I think those 3: the Saquon, Herbert, and Jamal. And then I'll do Ramandre and Chubb.
Love it. Shifting over to the wide receiver position. Similar to how we talked about Saquon, as a near lock. I feel like Stephon Diggs at 8,400 is kind of in that same sentence in that same area where he's just been getting so much lately. You look at the matchup, you look at the implied total, you look at the work, you look at everything, and 8,400 seems almost like a little bit of a deal here. Similar to Saquon at 8K, same feelings towards Diggs.
Yeah, my thing with Diggs is like, yes, he's fine at that price, but he's a little tougher to fit in. And I think if you're playing Allen, you're already getting a decent amount of the Diggs from that. So if I'm already playing Allen, I probably won't play Diggs at least in cash. It's expensive, but I think in tournaments, like playing them together, and then you don't play a Saquon in that lineup because it's hard to fit all 3. And there's obviously like other guys that you can fit that are higher up as well. But I don't think it's taking too much to drop off from Diggs to get in the 6K range. As mentioned before, like he's definitely the best wide receiver on the slate. Like not really any question about that. Like I do prefer him over Devonta Adams, but I think ownership wise, I would be interested in playing Devonta Adams because people are going to go to Diggs. So that's like the sort of pivot I would do there.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I think I'm just going to end up playing Allen, so I probably won't play Diggs in cash.
Probably my other favorite play has got to be CeeDee Lamb at 67. I think you mentioned it before the show that obviously this was priced before we saw that crazy target share on Monday, but the dude's got like a 30% target share at this point. Cooper Rush is just locking on him, throwing him the ball. He had a really bad drop. I mean last week. I mean on Monday, like it was tough to watch, but he's getting the volume, that kind of volume at 6,700 regardless, and the matchup's not great. It's the Commanders, so. I don't really care who's throwing the ball if he's getting that. If it's a good matchup and he's getting that volume, 6,700. CD for me is more of a lock than Diggs, but I like them both. But CD is probably one of those guys that I'm clicking early when building.
Yeah, and I think he got a little price discount because they played on Monday. Looked good on Monday. He had a couple of really nice catches, and I mean he's the best wide receiver on their team, and Cooper Rush knows how to find him. I don't think we're gonna get Dak back this week, but if we get Gallup back, then I don't necessarily think it's going to take too much away from Lamb. So to me, I think I'm fine with that. But yeah, I like CD. He's 1,600 less than Diggs. It's a decent chunk down. A lot of the guys in between the two are kind of similar. So like you're getting CD Lamb at, let's say like a 500 discount off of Pittman. And I think that's reasonable. So I like CD. He's probably my favorite of these wide receiver upper end, if you call it that. He's still under 7K, but I think CD Lamb, price based on price and opportunity, he's probably my favorite.
Give me another one.
Yeah, I like Chris Kirk as well at 6,600. Goes along with what we were saying about Trevor Lawrence. Each game this season, Kirk has at least 6 catches and 70 yards. He's finding the end zone a bunch. He's at 3 touchdowns, and he's just the guy that Trevor Lawrence is throwing to. And I've already mentioned I like this game environment. I think like a mini stack of him and AJ Brown, even if you don't have one of the QBs, I think I'd still end up playing that. It's a little more expensive, but that's probably also why I like it. They're the guys. Obviously, we saw a big game from Devonta last week, so I think that's where I prefer Kirk and Lamb over someone like AJ Brown, because we could see Devonta have another big game. Like Devonta's looked good the last couple of weeks. I think because of last week, it could bring up his ownership a little bit, but he didn't get priced up overly high. So do you have any interest in Devonta Smith this week?
I do want to go, before I go there, I want to walk back to Kirk.
Okay.
We're playing the Eagles. They got Bradbury and Slay who've been playing lights out on the outsides. I expect them to really lock down, the Joneses, Zay, and Marvin. So I think Christian Kirk's going to eat in this game. I think he's going to continue to eat. I still think there's a buy low window on Christian Kirk because people are still kind of like, writing him off because his name, writing him off it's because of the Jags. But I think he keeps this up all year long. So definitely there. Devonta Smith, not in cash, but I think he's a great tournament play. I know it's kind of a cop-out to say, but like I'm not playing him in cash at 58, but just because like he could easily put up a dud. We've already seen it happen this year. It's truly boom or bust. So my interest in Devonta Smith in cash is pretty nil.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you probably don't do it in cash, mostly because, I mean, you have Lockett, Cooks, Deontay Johnson, Drake London that are all like basically the same price, even Rashad Bateman. So I don't want to lay the he had a great week last week, like went absolutely off last week. So I probably won't end up chasing it, but I did think it was an interesting one. What did you think about those other guys I mentioned in that price range, though? Because I think we'll see those 3 get a lot of ownership, especially if people aren't going up to Diggs.
Say those
They're probably
3
going to
again.
end up in this range. Deontay Johnson, Tyler Lockett, and Brandon Cooks.
I think Lockett's chalk. I have no interest in Cooks. Deontay Johnson, I mean, God, I tell you what, like the targets are there, but like it is just so uninspiring with Trubisky behind. Like it's just like, yeah, dude, like 10 targets a game, freaking sick, dude. But like he turns it into 6 for 60. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like it is solid. It's probably a smart play in cash, But like, I don't know. There's just something gross about clicking Deontay Johnson's name right now, where like I'm just like, I'm sitting here like my gut feeling's like, is there a ceiling? Like, yeah, I could be eating my words. I mean, 10 targets a game. It's about he's gonna turn one loose eventually, but I don't know, man. Just like something about putting Deontay Johnson and Brandon Cooks in the lineup, just it's not sexy and it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I agree. I just think all these guys are kind of similar, where they're priced in this range because their upside is somewhat limited, but they get the volume. And in cash, you're just trying to get volume guys, so like they're all safe. I think, yeah, probably Deontay is the lowest for me. Like, it does seem like Lockett is someone that Gino is just gonna throw him
Yep.
8+ targets.
It makes DK a decent tournament play.
I really like DK in tournaments. Yeah, that game. If you do like Goff, if assuming Amon-Ra plays, like Goff, Amon-Ra, and Metcalf, like that's a good start to a team. A guy like Goff, I probably would want to double stack. But
Hawk,
what's
man,
your thoughts on Hawk? But what's your thoughts on Josh Reynolds' big game last week?
If Amon-Ra or Chark, who are both questionable, miss, yes, Josh Reynolds almost certainly. I mean, he's already out there, running a decent amount of routes. Like I think Amon-Ra still played last week, and he still almost had 100 yards.
He played like 3 quarters. Right?
Yeah,
he was only out for like a quarter.
And Goff and Josh Reynolds played together in the Rams, so there's like that narrative. I mean, 4,600. If Amon-Ra misses, it opens up a large chunk of targets. I still think Jamal Williams is going to get his on the ground, but I still think 7 to 8 targets without Amon-Ra St. Brown is pretty fine. He had 10 targets last week, so I think maybe I'm being a little conservative, but let's stick in this cheaper range, Lou. Give me another kind of sub 5K guy that you're looking at.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting below 5K this week. There's tons of options that you could go. And a guy who like, well, I'll go with the easy ones first. The Romeo Dubs 4,500 and Richie James 4K are going to be pretty popular. I think James is one of those guys that I don't want to call it a free square or anything, but because of his ownership and that price, he's almost like you kind of have to play him.
And you can explain that real quick, Lou, for some of the folks that might not totally get that. Like free square, it's like, we play him at 4K, right? And he duds. Why does that not matter? I mean, if he hits, we play a guy at 4K and it hits, like we understand why that's good. But if he duds, why does that not matter?
Yeah, he's looking to be around like 25% owned or so, and he's 4K. So if a guy at 4K gets you 8 points, it's probably okay because everyone else in his range at 4K, you have like Randall Cobb, DeAndre Carter, like Donovan Peoples-Jones, guys that literally might get zeros. So a lot of people around him are probably likelier to get that 8 or less points, but then he, because of his just the situation he's in with the Giants, he's pretty much locked into a role where he's probably going to get you that 8 points is probably his floor. Whereas these other guys have floor of 0 versus if you're playing someone like Deontay Johnson, if he gets you 8 points, but then Cooks and Lockett are both getting 15, 20 points, you're 7 points behind everyone. So Richie James also, if you don't play him, then your construction is different. So if he goes off and you don't have him, then it's going to be a lot worse because you're going to have to catch up and find a different guy that's 4K who did well in your lineup, and that's just going to be hard to do.
2 other plays I want to touch on, same range. Elijah Moore. Zach Wilson's back, and that was one of his favorite targets. Yeah. I'm a Garrett Wilson over Elijah Moore guy, but I mean, at 48K, it's tough to really look. I mean, we saw the connection last year, so I think there's interest there. Not necessarily a cash play, but like I think there's a world where like Elijah Moore is never 48K ever again. And then the other one that I have some interest in is going to be Trailon Burks. In my redraft league, I've dubbed this Trailon Burks week. It goes like this. We've been seeing his route participation just increase as a rookie. It's not incredibly, he had a rough camp, so it's not surprising to see him come out of the gate slow. He's a rookie after all, but he had a 96% route participation last week, the highest we've seen. I mean, that's a great route participation, by the way. And then you look at the matchup, and it's the Colts who've been staunch on the ground for the most part this year, and have been a little bit more leaky. The path of least resistance against the Colts is through the air. Yeah, they're going to try to get Derrick Henry going. Of course, that's their identity. But if they can't for some reason, and they need a spark, it looks like Trailon Burks is that guy. So he's kind of one of my more gut calls. I don't expect there to be a lot of ownership on Trailon Burks, but we know he is the kind of guy where it only takes one ball for him to pay off at this price. So just wanted to touch on Trailon Burks and Elijah Moore. I think they're both a little more risky. They're probably not like the safe cash plays, but I think they both have tremendous upside at that price.
Yeah. And even after I just said that about Richie James, the reason why I could see his ownership being a little lower, I don't think he's necessarily a free square, as I had mentioned what the free square was. Because you have Zay Jones and Mac Hollins are both 4,200. And after last week for Mac Hollins, people will probably play him again. But also Zay Jones has a probably similar floor to Richie James. Another guy I like in this sub 5K is Noah Brown. We talked about CeeDee Lamb, but Noah Brown is getting a good amount of usage and looks from Cooper Rush. He's looked great. Honestly, like, if Gallup is back, I think that would hurt him. So once Gallup is back, probably won't like him as much. But he's seeing the field and playing a lot more than Tolbert. Pretty clearly the number 2 there. He got
all those reps with Cooper Rush in the offseason, and it's paying off. And he's always looked good. I've been a Noah Brown fan for a couple of years, like in terms of just a good like deep dynasty stash, and that's paid off. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting ways to go. With pass catchers where there's some really chalky guys, but because of the price, you could pivot off the chalk pretty easily, and it's attractive. But that's a lot of wide receivers we've named. No matter what, some we're going to hit. But let's do a pool of 5 wide receivers, Lou. Let's narrow it down a little bit and make these calls.
Yeah. So for me, I'm gonna do CD, Kirk, Lockett. And then I'll say Trailon Burks. I do like that play.
Love it.
And then Richie James. But like I think Zay Jones will be a good pivot off of Rich James. I think he has a higher ceiling. Yep. But I think James might be safer.
Tight ends. I mean, it's funny here. I feel like we've been seeing this a lot. Mark Andrews is at 7,100, and then it's just gap. So let's just get this out of the way. Mark Andrews, 7,100. Thoughts?
I think if you can afford him, do it. It's going to be hard to do with those other 8K guys we have mentioned, but because of Mark Andrews at 7,100, that's where like I don't see myself. I think I'd play him before I play Diggs. That game environment, the best game environment. Mark Andrews has just continued to crush and be the number 1 tight end. Kelsey is never on the main slate because they always have island games. So whenever Kelsey's off the main slate, I like Andrews just stands out that much more, which maybe you just play him whenever Kelsey's there because people remember Kelsey. But he's 1,500 more than any other tight end, but it's very reasonable for him to be. So I would like to get him into lineups if I can, but it is pricey and there are a lot of cheap ways to go at tight end specifically. So I'd like Andrews, but I probably want to end up with him because that savings will be nice elsewhere.
So something that I think people are going to do, and I'm going to go a different way here, is we talked about this and we're in agreement, where I think a lot of people are going David Njoku, 3,700. But you pointed out that the floor is 0. Everyone's super excited about it. It's a good matchup on paper, like Atlanta Falcons are bad against the tight end. A lot of people are going to be clicking on David Njoku. If I can find the 4K, I like going up to TJ Hawkinson. There is a floor there. They are using him a bit in the red zone. We've already had conversations about this game and wanting pieces of it. And then at the same time, we also have talked about Amon-Ra and Chark injuries and Swift as well. So it's like opens up a lot there. It's why we like, Reynolds. I guess Josh Reynolds. Craig Reynolds, we're not going to play him, but there's 2 Reynoldses.
You could play both Reynolds this week.
Reynolds and Reynolds. Go Reynolds and Reynolds. Yeah. But I just think TJ Hawkinson at 4,100 just offers like a good price range for a good floor. And who's to say he doesn't bring down 2 tutties? So, I find myself, when people are going Joku, I'm just going a little farther up and hitting Hawkinson.
Yeah, I think I like that call. Whenever Njoku has these big games, people will steam him the next week, and then he just like almost always duds. He goes on these stretches. He's very boomer bust, which I mean for 3,700 tight end, like you're probably fine with a boomer bust guy because that's the one position that if you get a 0, you probably are okay with if you pay down. Like a 0 for Mark Andrews or Darren Waller isn't going to be great, but a 0 for 3,700 player, kind of what we were saying about James before. Like it's probably not going to hurt you as much. Tight end is just one of those positions where there's going to be a few big tight end scorers on the week, but if you get like 6 points, you're probably not too far chasing people. So I like the Hawkinson call over Joku, especially if we're not going to be playing like Amon-Ra or some of these other guys from the Lions. Then I think that makes me want to play it more. It's tough to play 2 Lions in the same cash lineup, but as I mentioned before, like they're expected to score one of the most points on the entire week. So I see that. I also kind of like to go back to Kyle Pitts here. Seems like he's another guy that's boomer bust, only 5K. If he has another big week, he's going to be more expensive next week. But game environment's good. I like stacking him with Mariota. I also like stacking London with him. But I think I prefer Pitts to Waller. And you're saving 600 there. I don't know if you need to pay up for 5K, but I think if I was paying higher than Hawkinson, it would be Pitts.
Yeah, I'm looking through this list right now, and I don't really I don't have anything else to add.
Evan Ingram, baby.
Yeah,
3,400, more Jags.
We talked about Kirk in the middle and it being tough on the outsides. Yep, Evan Ingram 3,400. There's some interest there. It's
Evan
gross.
Ingram's gonna get 3 catches for no. What did I say? 7 catches for 37 yards.
Yeah, 37 yards on 9 or 10 targets. Like
yeah, it's gross. Like he just gets these short area yards, but he could get peppered with targets, and that's the thing with these lower end tight ends. If you can get 6 catches out of them, that makes up for the 1 catch and touchdown that Conklin's gonna get you. So kind of interested in Ingram as well. 3,400 too. Pretty
pool of 3 tight ends, Lou. Let's finish it out.
Yeah,
with the defense.
Andrews, Hawkinson, and Pitts.
Love it. Defense, special teams. I think the move here is in my opinion, is just like going for some lower owned cheap ones. If I had to pick like one that I think is interesting, the CMC injury is looming. I think the Cardinals at 2,800 against a possible CMC list Carolina Panthers, who already look like even with CMC, they look terrible. So I think I have some. I don't expect it to be entirely too highly owned there. I also think that the Titans could be sneaky at 2,500 as well against the Colts. Pittman's back, but we did see the Jags shut out the Colts 2 weeks ago. So like, I don't think we can sit here and talk about the Colts being a great offense. We don't know exactly what it is yet. So I think the Bears are going to be very popular. I think that Bears Giants game is just going to be popular in terms of defense, special teams, low scoring total. There's a lot of ugly things going on both sides of the ball. So I wouldn't fault you for paying Bears or Giants, but like I'll probably look elsewhere just to get a little bit lower ownership. Your thoughts overall, Lou?
Yeah, I think Bears Giants seems like one of those obvious, like the game probably won't shoot out, so it's pretty safe to go there. I like the call on the Cardinals. That's interesting with like the injury concerns to CMC, as I mentioned before. Like Panthers already look pretty bad. And
they're running like 54 plays a game. Worse. They're playing like 54 plays a game.
It's like Baker. But I kind of like the Texans for if you're going cheap. Herbert playing with a rib injury. Like we saw the Jags just crush them last week. Like they might not be able to score all that much. So I kind of like the Texans for cheap. It's tough on the lower end because there's just most of the good defense plays you have to pay a little up for. So like Texans outside of them, I don't really love that many cheap defenses. Like Titans 2,500, I don't like that much. Maybe Jets, though. Jets 2,600 facing the Steelers. Both defenses in that game. Another low total game that I think you could see a lot of ownership on the defenses. What do you think about the Jets? They've been like sneakily all right this year.
I mean, Pitt's bad
from a fantasy standpoint.
But if I'm Jets are 26. I think I like the Broncos 27. Raiders are 0-3, and I think there's a lot of hope for this Raiders offense going into the year with the addition of Devontae Adams. But like, they also got Josh McDaniels, and let's get real about the Patriots coaching tree here. It's not exactly been the best track record. So like, I think there's an outside chance that the Raiders is bad, frankly. And I think that the Broncos, while their offense is looking anemic, like Russ is not cooking, maybe Russ is cooked, who knows? But the Raiders could have an opportunity, you know what I'm trying to say here. The Broncos have an actual like chance to essentially like, I wouldn't say shut them out, but keep it low scoring and be worth it. So I guess if I had to pick one other one, the Broncos would be it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Like, this thing is there's 3 or 4 games. This is the problem with the slate. Is like there's 3 games that look great, are projected to do really well, have great fantasy plays, and then there's like 3 or 4 just really bad games that you don't want to touch at all. And the way that we do it in the soccer streets is with goalie. It's similar to defense, where whichever of these games you're not touching, just take a defense from that game. Like, just take the defense from, like, if you're playing Deontay Johnson, don't take the Steelers or Jets. If you're playing Brandon Cooks, you can take the Texans, but it's one of those things where if you're like playing guys from that game, you don't really want to play the defense because you're kind of playing for that game to over. So a lot of low totals, just kind of going for one of those this week.
Lou, before we close out here, any final thoughts on the week, this cash slate? At least we can say it's a better cash slate than last week.
Yeah, it's a lot more straightforward. I think there's a lot more, there's less choices you have to make, like on the upper end. And like a lot of it's going to end up coming down to who scores more, Allen or Lamar, or even Hurts if you want to throw him in. But that's going to be the big game to watch this week. The Allen versus Lamar discussion is going to be fun to hear after the game, because whoever wins is obviously the better quarterback. So that'll be a fun game to watch. Outside of that, a lot of the games are pretty gross this week.
Just a fact. Lou, where can I find you on Twitter? Where can I find the work?
Yeah, at Lucky_Ludog. I work at Lucky Trader. Do some NFT and DraftKings Rainmakers content for them over there. But yeah, at Lucky_Ludog.
Find me on Twitter at FFTylero. That's all we have today, folks. Don't forget, tell somebody you love them. Later.